This is the fourth and final video explaining my answers to the CE300 Engineering Business Practices Midterm exam for Fall 2016, and on this sheet we're covering leadership. Explain the difference between an invitation, a request, and a command. In class, we added to our communications protocol by talking about the difference between an invitation, a request, and a command. We did this so that students would know when they're being instructed, when they're being invited, and when I'm just making a request. There are two things that are important. The first is the language that signals the difference between an invitation, request, and a command. And the other is the consequences. There are no consequences for declining an invitation. The language that we used is, "Are you interested?" or some other type of invitation that suggests there's no mandatory component. But an invitation says what I will commit to, and it asks other people to join me. The example we gave in class is, I'm going to, could be a Halloween party. Are you interested? An invitation commits the person issuing the invitation and offers an option to the person to whom they're inviting. There are two different ways of phrasing the request. The first was, will you? The second was, more powerful, I want you. And there are still no consequences for declining a request. But the way that you phrase it is more powerful than are you interested. Will you is very specific, and I want you turns out to be very persuasive. So we only make moral requests, that is, requests that we believe are in the best interests of the person of whom we're making the request. Finally, the language of the command always starts with please, and there will be consequences for declining a command. That is, you don't have to decline the command, but we don't know what the consequences always are. They might be grade points or lost opportunities. In other organizations, it might be a reprimand. In any case, the use of the word please at the front of a instruction, please do the dishes. In my family, that's a command. And there are consequences for failing to accept the command. In this way, we distinguish between invitations, requests, and commands so that subordinates in our organization understand the strength of the instructions that they're getting and how their decision relates to consequences. Describe the risks associated with setting performance goals for employees. The first risk, the most important risk, is that performance goals create incentives for unethical behavior. Remember in class we were talking about the principle of moral luck, intent versus outcome. And when we judge people in performance evaluation solely on the basis of their outcome, we introduce luck. But if we judge people solely on the basis of their intent, we introduce what's called moral hazard. Moral hazard is people will take risks and say, well, I didn't intend for it to go badly, but the risks that they take will become imprudent. So another downside of goals where we measure people exclusively on their outcomes is distortion of risk. That is the risk perception that people in our organization have, and the introduction of moral hazard. These two concepts are linked, and either one of them, unethical behavior or distortion of moral risks, are acceptable answers here. Also, you needn't go into the whole intent versus outcome to get full credit for this section, but you do have to have some understanding of additional risks of setting performance goals, and they are the narrowing of focus on a goal often causes us to miss opportunities, and those opportunities just might be good luck. And then the final one is that our energy can be so directed towards the goal. This is related to narrowing of focus, but we're going to call it misdirected creativity. Our energy is so directed towards the goal that we stop questioning whether the goal is worthy, whether it's the goal that we should keep in mind. And sometimes we learn things that would cause us to move the goalposts. Differentiate between critique and criticism. We did a table in class. I'm going to summarize it here. Critique and criticism. And we characterized critique as negative, criticism as balanced, critique as personal, focused on the person, and criticism as focused on the object of work. We characterized critique as judgmental and criticism as descriptive. We characterized critique. Critique can sometimes be sarcastic, which is very risky. Criticism, authentic. Critique can be ignorant. Criticism, expert. There are a number of other things that we probably could list here from our notes or from class. And it's okay to have things that you remembered from class that I don't remember. For example, destructive, constructive, biased, and that fits with balanced or objective. One more that's really important: selfish, selfless. And I just got the whole thing backwards. Criticism, critique. Critique focuses on the goals of the author. Criticism focuses on the goals of the critic. So, how to grade all of this? Well, we have three different sections, and the grades on this sheet are balanced. That is, each one of these could count for a third of the overall credit for the exam. And sometimes it's hard to work out where that credit lies. So up at the top, we're going to say invite, request, command. 10%, 10%, 10% is 30 overall. Describe the risks associated with setting performance goals for employees. It's really important to get the unethical behavior or distortion of risk. So that by itself is worth 20%. Any mention of intent versus outcome, moral hazard, and moral luck can contribute to that 20%. But the other aspect of this is the narrowing of focus or the misdirection of creativity. Another 10% for mentioning that. And finally, critique versus criticism. There's 40% left. And what I'm looking for is you to identify at least 4 of these distinctions between criticism and critique at 10% each. There's another 40% for a total of 100% over the entire sheet.